I've always found peace in the Appalachians. There is something ancient about those mountains, the way the mist clings to the rolling peaks and how the silence feels heavy, like a physical weight. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I had been planning this trip for months. It was supposed to be a 3-day disconnect from the world, a chance to test out our new gear and clear our heads. We arrived at the trailhead late on a Friday morning. It was an unmarked gravel turnoff, known mostly to locals and hardcore hikers, which is exactly why we chose it. We wanted isolation. But the moment we pulled up, the vibe was off. There was only one other vehicle in the small dirt lot, a silver Mercedes sedan. It looked absurdly out of place against the backdrop of overgrown rhododendrons and muddy ruts. But the weirdest part wasn't the car itself, it was the condition it was in. The driver's side door was standing wide open. "Maybe they just got here?" Sarah suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. I walked over to it. The interior was soaked. We had experienced a heavy thunderstorm 2 nights prior, and the leather seats were pooled with stagnant water. Leaves and twigs had blown into the footwell. There was no key in the ignition, no phone in the cup holder, and the glove box was closed. It looked like someone had stepped out of the car mid-conversation and just walked into the woods, leaving the door agape for 48 hours. "We should call someone," I said, but naturally, there was zero cell service. We debated leaving, but the drive here had taken 3 hours. I rationalized it away. Maybe it was stolen and dumped. Maybe the owner had a medical emergency and was already rescued. We decided to leave a note on our dashboard with the time and license plate number, locked our truck, and started the hike. The trail was grueling. The incline was steep and the humidity was suffocating. By the time we reached the plateau where we planned to camp, the sun was beginning to dip, casting long, distorted shadows through the trees. The spot we had aimed for was a natural clearing overlooking the valley. It was perfect, but as we broke through the tree line, we saw we weren't alone. A single tent was pitched right in the center of the clearing, the best spot. It was a high-end, ultralight trekking tent, the kind that costs upwards of $600. But sitting on a log next to it were 2 men that didn't fit the picture at all. They weren't wearing hiking gear, no moisture-wicking shirts, no boots, no cargo shorts. One was wearing faded, baggy jeans and a flannel shirt that looked 2 sizes too big. The other wore dress slacks and a dirty windbreaker. They were wearing worn-out sneakers, totally unsuitable for the rocky terrain we had just climbed. When we walked into the clearing, they stopped talking immediately. They didn't wave, they just stared. "Hey," I called out, trying to be friendly. "Mind if we set up near the edge? We won't crowd you." The man in the flannel shirt stood up. He was older than I initially thought, maybe in his 40s, with a patchy beard and eyes that looked glassy. "Been here a few days," he mumbled. His voice was flat, devoid of any inflection. "It's a good spot." "Yeah, great view," I said, dropping my pack. I noticed something strange. There were no backpacks near their tent, no cooking stove, no water filters, no sleeping pads drying out. Just the tent. "You guys hiking the whole loop?" Sarah asked, trying to break the tension. The second man, the one in the dress slacks, didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes fixed on my backpack. "Just camping," he said. I looked at their tent again. It was a 1-person tent, a bivvy-style shelter. It was barely big enough for 1 grown man to sleep comfortably, let alone 2. "Tight squeeze in there for 2 guys, isn't it?" I joked, forcing a laugh. They didn't laugh. The flannel guy just smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We make do." A cold shiver went down my spine that had nothing to do with the mountain air. I grabbed Sarah's arm gently. "Let's set up on the far side, way over there." As we pitched our tent about 50 yards away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being analyzed. Every time I glanced over, they were sitting on that log facing us. They weren't tending a fire, they weren't eating, they were just watching us set up our home for the night. Night fell hard and fast. Usually on these trips, we would build a small fire, drink some whiskey, and look at the stars. That night, neither of us wanted to be outside. We ate a cold dinner of jerky and trail mix inside our tent, speaking in hushed tones. "I don't like them," whispered Sarah, clutching her sleeping bag. "Where is their stuff, Mark? They didn't even have water bottles." "Maybe it's inside the tent," I said, though I didn't believe it. "Look, we'll wake up at first light and hike out. We won't even make breakfast here." I zipped the tent flap shut, but I kept my hunting knife, which I usually kept deep in my pack, right next to my pillow. Sleep was impossible. Every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps, every snap of a twig sounded like a threat. Around 2 a.m., the silence of the woods was overwhelming. I needed to relieve myself, and I had been holding it for an hour, too scared to go out. Finally, the pressure was too much. "I'll be right back," I whispered to a sleeping Sarah. I unzipped the fly slowly, trying to be silent. The moon was full, bathing the clearing in a pale, ghostly blue light. I stepped out, put on my boots, and scanned the clearing. The first thing I noticed was their tent. The flap was wide open. Curiosity and dread warred in my chest. From my angle, I could see inside. It was empty. Not just empty of people. It was empty. No sleeping bags, no pads, just the bare floor of the tent. Where are they? I turned on my headlamp, cutting a beam of light through the darkness. I swept it across the tree line. Then I saw them. They weren't on the trail. They weren't down by the ridge. They were standing directly behind a large oak tree, less than 10 feet from our tent. They were standing shoulder to shoulder, perfectly still. They weren't looking at me. They were staring intently at the canvas wall of our tent, right where Sarah's head was resting. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would burst. They hadn't heard me come out, or maybe they did, and they didn't care. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracked, sounding small in the vast woods. Slowly, almost robotically, they turned their heads toward me. The man in the flannel shirt had that same blank expression. He didn't look angry. He didn't look surprised. He looked like he was looking at a piece of meat. He took one step toward me. I didn't wait. I didn't ask what they wanted. Instinct took over, primal and absolute. "Sarah, get up, now!" I screamed, diving back into the tent. She woke up screaming. "We have to go. Leave everything. Run!" I grabbed her hand, dragging her out of the tent in her socks. We didn't take our packs. We didn't take the car keys. We just ran. We sprinted down that treacherous rocky trail in the pitch black, guided only by the erratic beam of my headlamp. I could hear movement behind us, heavy, clumsy footsteps crashing through the brush, but I didn't look back. We fell multiple times, scraping our skin raw, but the adrenaline numbed the pain. We didn't stop until we reached the main road, miles from the trailhead. We flagged down a trucker at 4 a.m., hysterical and covered in mud. The police investigated the next day. When they went up to the campsite, our expensive gear was gone, but the small tent was still there. Here is the part that makes me sick to my stomach every time I think about it. The police ran the plates on the Mercedes at the trailhead. It belonged to a 72-year-old man named Arthur, a retired geography teacher who loved solo hiking. He had been missing for a week. When the rangers searched the stranger's campsite, they found Arthur's wallet buried under the log they had been sitting on. The expensive tent wasn't theirs, it was Arthur's. The flannel shirt the man was wearing, it was identified by Arthur's wife as his favorite gardening shirt. Those men didn't have gear because they weren't hikers. They were drifters who had found Arthur, killed him, and dumped his body somewhere deep in a ravine that hasn't been found to this day. They were just living in his campsite, wearing his clothes, using his things, waiting for someone else to come along so they could upgrade their supplies. If I hadn't gone outside that night, if I hadn't seen them standing there, waiting for us to fall into a deeper sleep, I don't think we ever would have left that mountain. I've hiked the trails in Pennsylvania my whole life. There's a specific kind of silence in the PA woods during late autumn. The leaves are damp, absorbing sound, and the trees are like gray pillars holding up a steel-colored sky. I usually hike to clear my head from the corporate grind, and that Saturday was supposed to be no different. I chose a less popular loop, about 7 miles long, hoping to avoid the weekend crowds. For the first 2 hours, I didn't see a soul. It was just me and the crunch of gravel under my boots. But around mile 4, the trail narrowed as it wound through a dense patch of hemlocks. That's when I saw him. A man was sitting cross-legged on the ground, right on the edge of the path. He wasn't sitting on a log or a rock, just the wet dirt. He was wearing a heavy, oversized canvas jacket with the hood pulled down low over his face, obscuring his features. He didn't move as I approached. He looked like a statue draped in dirty fabric. I did the polite hiker nod as I walked past, muttering a quick, "How's it going?" He didn't respond. He didn't even lift his head. I walked past him, feeling that prickle of unease on the back of my neck. You know that feeling, when your lizard brain tells you that you are being watched by a predator. I picked up my pace, just wanting to put distance between us. About 5 minutes later, I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy footsteps. Fast. Someone was running. I spun around, adrenaline dumping into my system. It was the guy, the man in the canvas jacket. He was sprinting toward me, his arms pumping awkwardly. Hey, wait up! His voice was gravelly and breathless. I froze, gripping my trekking pole a little tighter. He slowed down as he reached me, stopping about 5 feet away. Now that he was standing, I saw he was big, tall and broad-shouldered. I still couldn't see his eyes clearly under the hood, but I saw a scruffy, unkempt beard and pale, chapped lips. He was holding something out to me. "You dropped this," he wheezed. In his dirty hand was a brown leather wallet. It looked ancient, cracked leather, warped by moisture, with stitching coming undone at the corners. I patted my pockets instantly. "No, I didn't. I have mine right here." I tapped my chest pocket where my Velcro sport wallet lived. The man didn't lower his hand. He took a step closer. "No, you dropped it back there. I saw it fall." "Look, man, that's not mine," I said, my voice firming up. "I've never seen that thing before." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The man's body language changed from helpful to aggressive. His shoulders tensed. "I ran all the way here to give this to you. You dropped it. Take it." It wasn't a request. It was a command. He thrust the wallet toward my chest, invading my personal space. He was close enough that I could smell him, a stale sweat and something metallic. I looked at his other hand. It was balled up inside his jacket pocket. My instinct screamed, "Do not argue. Just take it and get him away from you." "Okay," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "My mistake, thanks." I reached out and took the gross, damp leather wallet. The man stared at me for a second longer, his chest heaving. Then, without another word, he turned around and started walking back the way he came. He didn't run this time. He just walked, disappearing into the hemlocks. I stood there for a long time until I was sure he was gone. I looked down at the wallet in my hand. I opened it. It was empty. No money, no credit cards, no ID, just an empty, rotting leather shell. Why would he chase me down to force an empty wallet on me? The creepiness of the situation killed my mood. I put the nasty wallet in the side mesh pocket of my backpack. I didn't want to touch it, but I was afraid to throw it on the ground in case he was watching, and I started hiking fast toward the parking lot.
The sun sets early in the mountains during the fall. By the time I navigated the final switchbacks and saw the asphalt of the parking lot, the woods were bathed in deep twilight. The shadows stretched long and thin, merging into pockets of total darkness. The parking lot was nearly empty. My SUV was the only car left in the lower section. I was exhausted and on edge. Every rustle of leaves made me flinch. All I wanted to do was get in my car, lock the doors, and drive until I found a gas station with bright lights. I fished my keys out of my pocket as I approached the vehicle. I was about 20 yards away when I stopped. My SUV has tinted windows, so you can't see inside, but you can see underneath it. The lot was gravel, and the light from a distant lamppost was casting a faint glow under the chassis. There was a shadow interrupting the light. It was a long, dark shape stretching out from behind the rear driver's side tire. Someone was crouching behind my car. My stomach dropped to the floor. I thought about the man on the trail. I thought about the wallet. If I walked to the driver's side door, I would have to turn my back to the rear of the car to unlock it. I would be trapped in the V between the open door and the body of the car. It's the perfect choke point. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal, a raccoon? But the shadow was too big. It was human-sized.
I took a breath and made a split-second decision. I didn't go to the driver's side. I walked casually toward the passenger side, keeping my eyes scanned on the woods as if I hadn't noticed anything. I kept my thumb hovering over the unlock button on the fob. 10 yards. 5 yards. I lunged. I hit the unlock button, ripped the passenger door open, and dove across the center console. As I scrambled over the gear shift, I hit the frantic lock button on the driver's side armrest. Click, clunk. At the exact same moment, a fist slammed against the driver's side window. Bang! I screamed, fumbling to get the key into the ignition. A face pressed against the glass. It was him, the man in the canvas jacket. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was slamming his palms against the window, his eyes wide and manic, illuminated by the dashboard lights. He was screaming, but the sound was muffled by the glass. "Give it back!" Bang! Bang! "You stole it! Give it back to me!" My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys on the floor mat. I scrambled for them, terrifyingly aware that a layer of glass was the only thing separating me from him. He was pulling on the door handle, rocking the whole car with his violence. "Open the door! Give me the wallet!" I finally jammed the key in and turned it. The engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse and floored it. The man didn't let go immediately. He ran alongside the car for a few feet, slapping the metal before I swerved out of the spot and spun the car around. My headlights swept over him. He was standing in the middle of the empty lot, chest heaving, pointing a finger at me. I didn't look back again. I drove 20 miles over the speed limit until I hit the interstate. When I got home, I threw the wallet into the dumpster behind my apartment complex without touching it with my bare hands. I sat on my couch and just shook for an hour. It took me a while to realize what had actually happened. The logic of it is what keeps me up at night. The wallet wasn't about the wallet. It was a prop. If I had refused to take it on the trail, he might have attacked me there. But by taking it, I gave him a reason to follow me, a reason to approach me in the parking lot. He was waiting for me to go to the driver's door. He was crouching there, ready to grab me the moment I was distracted by unlocking the car. And when I dodged his trap, he switched the narrative immediately. He started screaming that I stole it. A ranger or police officer had driven by, they would have seen a man trying to retrieve his stolen property from a thief, not a predator attacking a hiker. He wanted me to open that window or door to return it. He wanted to get his hands inside the car. I still hike, but never alone, and I never, ever park in the back of a lot anymore. If someone tries to hand you something in the woods, even if they beg, even if they threaten you, don't take it. Just run. I've been hiking solo for 10 years. I know the rules. I know the risks. I carry bear spray, a satellite beacon, and enough water to survive a drought. I'm not easily spooked. In fact, the solitude is usually the point. But there's a specific kind of fear that hits you when you realize that the wilderness isn't the most dangerous thing on the mountain. Last October, I decided to tackle a loop trail in the Adirondacks. It wasn't an overly technical hike, but it was long, about 18 miles of rugged terrain that required an overnight stay if you wanted to enjoy it. I started early on a Tuesday, meaning the trails were practically empty. For the first 6 hours, the only living things I saw were chipmunks and a single startled deer. Around 2 p.m., I was deep in the interior, miles from the nearest trailhead or cell tower. The path was narrow here, cutting through a dense thicket of balsam firs that blocked out most of the sun. That's when I saw him. A man was walking toward me from the opposite direction. Now, seeing another hiker isn't unusual, but in the backcountry, you learn to scan people's gear. You look at their boots, their packs, their hydration systems. It tells you a story about them. This man had no story. He was wearing jeans, a massive red flag in hiking communities because cotton kills when it gets wet. He had on a simple gray t-shirt and generic tennis shoes that were already caked in mud. But the most disturbing part was what he didn't have. He had no backpack, no water bottle, no trekking poles, nothing. We were at least 8 miles from the nearest road. No one just walks 8 miles into the high peaks in jeans without so much as a bottle of Aquafina. As we got closer, my stomach tightened. I gripped my trekking poles a little tighter, preparing to do the standard friendly hiker nod and keep moving without breaking stride. He stopped right in the middle of the path, blocking my way. I was forced to stop about 6 feet from him. He was average height, maybe early 30s, with clean-shaven face and short hair. He looked remarkably normal, which somehow made it worse. He wasn't sweating, despite the humidity. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice bright and confident. He didn't return the greeting. He just looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my heavy backpack. Then he asked a question that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Where is your group?" It wasn't casual small talk, it was an assessment. My brain went into overdrive. Never admit you are alone. That is rule number 1 for solo female hikers. I gestured thumb over shoulder back the way I came. "Oh, they're right behind me. My boyfriend had to stop to retie his boot, and our friend is waiting with him. They'll be around the bend in about 2 minutes. I lied smoothly, maintaining eye contact. I expected him to look nervous, or maybe just nod and move on. Instead, a slow, wide smile spread across his face. It didn't look friendly, it looked knowing, like he knew I was lying, but he was amused by my attempt. "Good," he said softly. "It's dangerous to be out here alone." He stepped aside then, finally clearing the path. "Have a good hike," I said, forcing myself to walk past him. I didn't run, though every instinct in my body screamed at me to sprint. I walked for about 50 yards before I dared to look back. The trail behind me was empty. The forest was silent. I didn't stop for a break again. I pushed hard for another 3 hours, fueled by pure adrenaline. I wanted to put as much distance between myself and that man as possible. By the time the sun started to dip below the tree line, I was exhausted, but I felt safer. I assumed he was just a weird day hiker who had underestimated the trail and turned around. I was wrong.
I didn't camp at the designated shelter that night. I didn't want to be near anyone, especially not in a place that was marked on a map. Instead, I practiced stealth camping. I bushwhacked about 200 yards off the main trail, fighting through dense underbrush until I found a small, flat clearing hidden behind a massive boulder. It was a perfect hiding spot. From the trail, you would never know I was there. I set up my tent in the twilight, didn't build a fire, and ate a cold dinner of protein bars. I just wanted to sleep and get out at first light. By 9 p.m., it was pitch black, the kind of darkness that feels heavy, pressing against your eyelids. I crawled into my sleeping bag, clutching my bear spray like a teddy bear. I dozed off eventually, the exhaustion overtaking the fear. I woke up at 2:13 a.m. I didn't know what woke me at first. The woods were dead silent. No wind, no crickets, just that ringing silence that happens deep in the mountains. Then I heard it. Crunch. It was the sound of a dry branch snapping under weight. It was close, maybe 20 feet away. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was afraid the sound would give me away. It's a deer, I told myself, or a raccoon. Crunch. Swish. The sound of fabric brushing against pine needles. Animals don't wear fabric. Someone was walking through the brush, moving slowly, deliberately. They weren't crashing through like a lost hiker. They were stalking. I lay perfectly frozen, holding my breath until my lungs burned. The footsteps got closer. 15 feet. 10 feet. They stopped, right outside my tent. I could hear the breathing. It was slow, rhythmic, and terrifyingly close. Whoever it was standing less than 2 feet from my head, separated only by a thin sheet of nylon. I gripped the canister of bear spray, my finger trembling on the trigger. I waited for the zipper to move. I waited for a voice. I waited for a knife to slash through the wall. But nothing happened. The person just stood there. Minutes turned into hours. I am not exaggerating. For what felt like an eternity, I lay there listening to the soft inhale and exhale of a stranger standing in the dark, watching my tent. He didn't move.
He didn't try to get in. He was just there. It was psychological torture. He wanted me to know he was there. He wanted me to be terrified. I didn't sleep again. I stared at the dark ceiling of the tent, tears streaming silently down my face, praying for the sun to rise. Around 4:30 a.m., just as the sky began to turn a bruised purple, I heard movement again. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The footsteps retreated, slow and deliberate, just as they had come. They faded back toward the main trail until silence reclaimed the woods. I waited another hour until the sun was fully up before I unzipped the tent. I burst out with the bear spray raised, screaming, ready to fight for my life. The clearing was empty. The birds were singing. The morning light filtered through the trees like nothing had happened. I almost convinced myself I had hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe it was a dream? A sleep paralysis episode brought on by stress? Then I walked around to the back of my tent. The ground there was soft, damp moss, and there, pressed deeply into the earth, were footprints. Sneakers, not hiking boots. Sneakers with a distinctive, worn-out tread. There were 2 clear prints facing directly at the spot where my head had been resting. But it wasn't just 2 prints. The moss was trampled flat. There were dozens of impressions, shifting slightly left and right, overlaid on top of each other. It meant he hadn't just stopped for a minute. He had stood there for hours, shifting his weight, watching, listening to me breathe. I packed my camp in 3 minutes flat. I didn't care about leave no trace. I ran. I ran the 6 miles back to the trailhead, sobbing the entire way. When I got to my car, I locked the doors and drove until I was 2 towns over before I stopped shaking. I reported it to the rangers, but there wasn't much they could do. A guy in jeans with no gear? That description fits half the tourists in the state. I still hike, but never alone. And I never, ever stealth camp anymore. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't being attacked. It's knowing that someone was right there, capable of doing anything they wanted to you, and they chose not to, simply because they enjoyed watching you fear them more.